Time has passed, and some of our roughed out bowls are now dry and ready to come out. By now, the bowl will likely have twisted some. Therefore, before we can address anything, we first need to recreate our baselines, specifically to once again make the tops and bottoms flat and parallel. Lathe turners need to do the same thing, but since they only work in the round, they use the fixed axis of the lathe to force their bowls to be flat and round again. For us, our different shapes require that we redesign the newly dried bowl using the same tools and concepts as before, but then carve to these new lines. It's not a complex process. As I mentioned in chapters 4 and 5, designing a triangular and rectangular bowl is directly on the rim, so their original design steps on their tops are exactly the same. Because rectangular bowl design is so straightforward, using rulers and squares on both their top and bottom, I'm not going to address them in this chapter. However, in the case of oval and triangular bowls, application of the underlying design concepts benefits from some tricks at this stage with a newly dried bowl. Therefore, this chapter will address oval bowl design, top and bottom redesign, and I'll demonstrate a process to simplify a key step in the redesign of a triangular bowl's feet. Just to make a point, not all warpage leaves you with something from which you can recover. Clearly, thinner trays carved across heterogeneous wood are most at risk. While this example became firewood, before you toss a piece into the firewood pile, think creatively whether an entirely new design may be possible. In the past, I've created tiered trays that took advantage of the warpage in order to recover a beautiful piece of wood. Flattening starts with the most visible zone, the top. Regardless of bowl shape, the first step is to create our baseline, which will become the elevation for the rim. I like to lay the warped bowl upside down on a large flat surface and adjust it so those points farthest from the counter are similar. It is the largest vertical distance from the flat surface that defines the elevation to set the marking rod. This high-tech tool is a securely taped marker set at a slight angle so that depending on which side of my rod I have down, I can make a mark at about 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and at about 1 inch. For the myriad of other possible heights, I merely use coins or magazines under either the bowl or the marking rod. As you can see, by merely moving the marking rod around the bowl, I create a uniform elevation around the rim, showing precisely what needs to be removed from where needed to make a flat top. I now need to remove the high points. Where there are large distances on the unflattened rim to my baseline, I carve down to near, but not to the baseline. This is a pretty quick process. For mostly flat tops, I go directly to the large belt sander. The final flattening of the top and bottom is done on the belt sander. It's important to move the piece around as you try to get the surface uniformly in contact with your drawn line. Once the rim is flat, I then flatten the bottom to make it parallel with the top, similarly moving the piece around to avoid excess removal from any zone. Making the feet parallel with the top is achieved by simply measuring the height of the bowl when standing on a flat surface. If one side or end is high, that section of the bottom is removed by further sanding. When done, the bowl will sit flat and the distance from the rim to the bench top is the same. This process will take a bit of practice, but it's the fastest and most reliable method that I've found. It's now time to finalize the design of the bowl. Rectangular and triangular bowls, which are designed for measurements only on the rim, this is straightforward. For ovals, where the center lines are defined by the intersections of circles and arcs away from the rim, it's necessary to employ some cleverness. I start by seeing what circles and arcs best match the bowl in its newly dried form. In this case, the original design used a 7-inch circle to make the east-west ends and a 4-foot arc for the north-south sides. Happily, those still work. The east-west ends are done first in this case, although that's not necessary. I'm drawing the outside of the bowl, so I need to make sure that I have enough space between my rough carved interior and the bowl's new exterior ends that is at least the desired width of the rim. Note that sometimes I may use a pencil to see if all of my arcs and circles give me what I want, and if not, redraw them before finalizing the design in pen. Note that I'm using a pen that makes a relatively thin line for this, as it makes my process for creating tangents much more accurate. Right now I want to finalize the design of the handles, which in this case are to be rounded. To do this, I use a 5.5-inch circle custom made in Microsoft's Word program, as I determined that was the size that would fit between the north-south sides and give me the size handles in their location that I desire. Because the bowl's ends and its handles are circles placed tangent to the north-south arcs, they will both be properly oriented and be placed the same distance from each other. Now all I need are my interior carving lines to guide initial carving of the dry wood with the aggressive carving tool. Final room dimensions will be set during the next carving stages. Each carving step using a successively less aggressive cutting as I approach the desired wall thickness give me good control. Now I need to define the north-south center lines, and I have 4 options I regularly use when I redesign dry bowls. As you saw a minute ago, the simple method demonstrated in Chapter 3 of using the north-south arc for this bowl do not intersect with any available surface. Thus, let me demonstrate these 3 others. Here, my next choice is to see if a smaller arc in my inventory might work. You can see here that a 2-foot arc placed tangent to the east-west circles will give me intersections of the handle of this bowl. Geometric laws guarantee that sections of a true circle of any size, when placed tangent to your east-west circles, will yield the same center line. Further demonstrating this, the next approach is to use a wider arc to make a new north-south tangent to find the same center line outside the confines of the bowl. Just as geometry tells me I can use a smaller arc, I can also use a larger arc. Therefore, I need merely to find a stable location on which to draw any intersecting north-south arc. To do this, I build a tower of books and magazines that match the height of the bowl and tape a piece of paper to the top of each tower. Using the 4.5-foot arc this time gives me an intersection on the tops of the towers a few inches outside the confines of the bowl, and geometry tells me this will be the center line. My fourth approach, which I most commonly use for long fruit bowls and centerpieces, is to simply draw a pair of straight lines connecting the top of the east-west circles, one on the north side, the other on the south side. I will now have 2 parallel lines perfectly oriented with the bowl, from which I can measure for the halfway point. I verify the bowl's width, and then using a heavy straight edge, I merely adjust the straight edge so that it is placed exactly at the halfway distance from my newly made parallel lines. Using that straight edge to draw a line on the ends of the bowl give me the center line. As you can see, each of these 4 approaches have produced the exact same center line. Finally, if I want to mark my second center line now, in this case the east-west center line, there are 2 ways to do this. The one I use most for finished carving work is my scoring box, which will be presented later in this chapter. The other method is straightforward and involves measurement and a framing square. For this, I'm using a yardstick set on newly drawn center lines with one end of the yardstick set precisely at the end of the bowl. I can now verify the total length of the bowl, which means I can now easily compute the center. By locking down the yardstick, I can use the framing square to transfer the center point to each of the north-south sides. It's now time to design the feet. For this, we're going to be using the squaring box. In preparing for that, I trimmed the bowl's perimeter to its final dimensions in the large belt sander. Smooth motions make this both quick and easy. Now your bowl shape and its exterior dimensions are set. I next move to the squaring box to transfer my center lines to the bottom of the bowl and to design the feet. This can be used for the placement of feet in oval, triangular, and rectangular bowls. In all cases, we get our bowl oriented with the box and then measure from the back or the side of the box with a ruler and a square. This is so straightforward for rectangular bowls placed in a rectangular box, I'm not going to go into it here. Note the black line roughly in the middle of the box's back and bottom. The role of this will be demonstrated when I show how to use the box for triangular bowls. This scoring box is simply a 3-sided box with each side built perpendicular to each other. If you have a truly square and easily accessible corner in your house, you can use that, but I find few houses have truly square corners in convenient locations. A key to using this approach is that the bowl's top and bottom are flat and parallel, and that the bowl's final shape is defined. So let's look at how to use the box, first for ovals and then for triangular bowls. I start by making sure that I have accurate measurements for the bowl's length and width. I then mark the bowl's north-south center line on its end so that I can see the location of that center line when the bowl is upside down. Placing the upside down bowl snug to both the back and the end of the box, I verify that the center mark on the end measures to be 1/2 the width of the bowl. At this point, the bowl is aligned with the box. Now simply drawing a pair of lines at the halfway distance from the back and the end of the box gives me the bowl's 2 center lines. Finally, I draw the bowl's feet. Here, a trapezoidal shape with the outer ends being narrower reflect the curvature of the bowl. I place the feet by simply measuring off the east-west center line and use the square to make my lines. It's both simple and quick. My final step is to mark the thickness of my handles and to mark a line about 1/8 of an inch from the rim to guide my finished carving. Both are easily measured and marked from the bottom of the box. This line below the rim will be your finished carving line, creating a short vertical zone at the rim on the outside. When you finish leveling the finished bowl, as will be shown in Chapter 9, that vertical line will permit you to perform some last-minute trimming of the rim. If the bowl has made some movement during the final finish carving and primary sanding steps, the leveling will not change the shape of the rim. If there's been no movement, that line can become an embellishment, or the final sanding can eliminate it by having the side end at a sharp line at the top of the rim. Foot design for triangular bowls is also easy within the scoring box. The line drawn in the back and the bottom of the box at equal distances from the end is used now. Here is a finished triangular bowl that I took down from our shelf to illustrate the process. Think of this as a newly dried bowl that has now been reflattened and the top redrawn on the rim as shown in Chapter 4. I've marked the center lines on each handle and its opposite side on the blue tape that I applied so the lines can easily be seen in this dark bowl. These are then drawn over the edge so I can see them when the bowl is placed upside down. I then place the bowl's top on the lines marked on the box. One of the bowl's handles is facing the back of the box with its drawn center line against the line on the box. This means the opposite side of the bowl is facing me and its line is matched to the line on the bottom of the box. The bowl is now oriented to the box and each of the other handles and feet should be at equal distances from the back. If you're using a very square corner in your house, you can apply a temporary piece of tape on the wall and the counter on which you can draw perpendicular lines for this purpose. A square will now allow you to draw across the bottom towards the foot facing you. As you can see, rotating the bowl 3 times demonstrates that simple geometric principles are at work, as my 3 lines produce a precise center point. This means that each line, if drawn on the feet in a roughed out bowl, will reliably guide your design of your bowl's feet. Now, with the design marked on your bowl, you're ready to begin finished carving. I address that step in the next installment.